Buenas tardes a todas y a todos. Gracias por estar aquí, quienes nos acompañáis, y también a todos los que nos estáis siguiendo a través del streaming. Os habíamos anunciado que teníamos una noche muy potente y aquí estamos ya con el cenit de estas jornadas de Córdoba Destino. Tenemos a grandes figuras aquí del pop rock británico que han hecho hazañas en el pop de su país, en la música de su país. Voy a empezar a presentaros a cada uno de ellos. Tengo a mi izquierda tengo a Alan McAgee. Alan McAgee es el batería de la banda británica Tinderstick, en la que contribuyó significativamente al sonido distintivo de sus primeros 6 álbumes y bandas sonoras. Además de su trabajo con Tinderstick, McAgee ha colaborado con músicos de sesión, con artistas como Cousteau y Scott 4, y formó parte de una primera encarnación de Levitation. Actualmente es miembro fundador y líder de la banda Three Head, que la vais a poder escuchar cuando acabe esta charla, y en la que compone, hace percusión, teclados y coproducción. Sigue su trayectoria en la escena musical independiente. A su lado tenemos a Mike Smith. Ayer inauguramos una exposición muy interesante que os recomiendo vivamente que vayáis a ver en El Automático, con una serie de cuadros que ha ido haciendo a lo largo de su carrera artística y musical, de músicos de Gran Bretaña. Os recomiendo que no os la perdáis. Mike Smith actualmente preside la empresa de gestión de derechos y servicios musicales Downtown Music Publishing, pero comenzó su carrera como cazatalentos. Fichó a artistas icónicos como Blur, Gorillaz, PJ Harvey para EMI y ha estado al frente de sellos como Columbia Records, Warner Chappell y Mercury Records, descubriendo talentos emergentes como Calvin Harris, The Libertines y Mark Ronson. Además de su trabajo en la música, Smith es un gran defensor del empleo en las industrias creativas y colabora con diversas organizaciones benéficas que promueven el cambio social a través del arte. Y por último, os quiero presentar aquí conmigo a Youth. Buenas tardes, Youth. Hello to everybody. The first place. Martin Glover, más conocido como Youth, es un reconocido productor, compositor y bajista de la banda post-punk Killing Joke, y su trayectoria abarca más de 3 décadas, en las que ha colaborado con artistas como Paul McCartney en su proyecto The Fireman, con Pink Floyd, The Verve y Crowded House. Youth también es pionero en la música electrónica y la escena de trance psicodélico. Es el fundador de los sellos Dragonfly Records y Butterfly Records, que innovaron en los géneros Goa y Psytrance. Con ellos y con una persona más que no tenemos aquí, pero que quizá es la que ha aglutinado a todos ellos esta tarde, es Alan McAgee. Es una figura que muchos de vosotros conocéis porque fue el descubridor del grupo Oasis. Los descubrió en un pub de Glasgow en los años 90, les ofreció algunos de sus primeros contratos discográficos y con él batieron récord mundiales, vendieron muchísimo, como todos sabéis. Este empresario escocés es una figura clave en la industria musical británica, es el fundador del sello Creation Records y la emblemática discográfica independiente que además de Oasis impulsó a otras bandas también icónicas como Primal Scream, My Bloody Valentine. Su sello definió el sonido de los años 80 y 90 en el Reino Unido. Y como os decía, no está aquí, pero sí está aquí, porque Alan nos ha querido grabar un saludo desde Glasgow, no ha podido venir aquí, pero vamos a escucharlo en este vídeo que nos ha dejado.
Hey, this is Alan McAgee. I'm in Glasgow, trying to sign a band. Nothing's changed. And I just hope that everybody in October has an amazing time. Big love and shout out to Mike Smith, who really signed the best things in Britpop. He signed Blur, tried to sign Oasis. Thankfully, I managed to get there before him. But Mike is an incredible man as a person, mainly, but as a talent, unbelievable. Thank God I'm still mates with him. He's a really good guy. And have a great time and bask in the glory of Mr. Michael Smith from Mike Smith, his mates. He's a pulse of nature and beautiful person. Have a good one. Bye.
Muchas gracias a Alan McAgee. Y obviamente, for references, the first question goes for you. Let's gossiping to try to warm up the conversation.
Okay.
Tell us about this story. who got first, or who got his Oasis, but how was the whole story? Did you fight?
Well, Oasis were knocking around for quite a while at the start of the 1990s, and they were rehearsing a lot in Liverpool. And actually quite a few people in the music business who knew Noel Gallagher when he was working for the road crew of In Spiral Carpets. They'd been along, they checked out the band, and because it was early days, they had dismissed the band. They sort of like said, oh, they're like Stone Roses copyists. And this often happens in music, that people get to see talent at a very early stage, and it's not quite ready. And I think a lot of people had dismissed it. Anyway, it so happened that Alan McAgee was in Glasgow at a time when Oasis were up there, and they'd fought to get into a gig at King Tut's. And Alan had missed his train back to London. So him and his sister were hanging out in Glasgow, not sure what to do. And he went, oh, I've got a band playing at King Tut's tonight. I think it was One Lady Owner, is that right? Yeah, I think they were called One Lady Owner. It was a band signed to Creation, not a very good band. And Alan says, well, I'll go and check them out. And he turned up, and this band from Manchester, Oasis, had blagged on the way to see them. And so they opened up. So Alan was sitting downstairs at the venue, and somebody said, oh, you should come up and see this band. So he went up, and I think he was just immediately struck by two things. One, the quality of the songs, and two, the quality of the singer. You know, those things were very, very apparent right from the beginning. The structure of the songs were great. You immediately felt like you'd known those songs all your life. And Liam was undeniable as a frontman, as a rock star. He just had it. He looked beautiful, but he looked like a man that both men and women could sort of like admire and fall in love with. So Alan just went up to Noel Gallagher and said, you know, basically said, who's in charge? And Noel said, it's me. And he said, oh, I'm Alan McAgee. I'd like to offer you a deal. And, you know, there aren't many people in the music business that have got the authority to do that, and also the confidence to do that. But Alan was one of those people that was very strong, always acted on his gut instinct, and had been proven right more often than he'd been proven wrong. He hadn't put out many records that were not of some value. They may not have always been hugely successful, but they were always interesting records. So he felt very confident in his own opinion, and something about the band had struck a chord. So the band, you know, initially weren't quite sure what to make of it, but Noel came down to London a few days later, went to the Creation office in Hackney, went up, met Alan, it was all for real, and they did a deal. And that was in I guess, the late spring of 1993. I saw Oasis, and I was a publisher at the time, so I was interested in the songwriting. So I saw the band in the autumn in Manchester. There was a big cultural event, a bit like this, called In the City, where lots and lots of bands play, and people get up and they talk about the music business. And Creation Records had a night, and at a place called the Canal Cafe Bar. And the first band on that night was Oasis. And again, there were less people in the audience, a lot less people in the audience than are here tonight. And I think there was probably about 5 or 6 of us there, and I was standing there with a friend of mine from school watching Oasis. First time I'd seen them, I just heard that Alan had signed a new band, so I worked with Alan on a few things. I was interested to see what the band was like. And again, the songs immediately sounded good. The band were working with some really good sound technicians and good roadies, so they had a really good sound. Noel Gallagher had a really good wall of sound of guitars. So from the very beginning, they sounded great. The songs were really good, and Liam Gallagher was a rock star. He looked amazing. I thought, maybe Bonehead and Giggsy and Tony McCarroll, the drummer, they looked like plumbers. They didn't look like rock stars. But Noel looked okay, and Liam looked amazing, and the songs were great. And so I was very excited. I immediately spoke to their manager and said, I love the band, I really want to sign their publishing, sign their songwriting. And I came up and I saw them a week later. They were playing a small bar in Manchester, and I could remember every single one of those songs. Those songs were amazing. And then I said, oh, I'd love to meet the band. And they said, well, they're doing a show at the Paradiso in Amsterdam. Why don't you come over and see them? So I'd arranged to fly out to Amsterdam, and I'm literally about to go to the airport to meet them when the manager calls me up and goes, actually, don't bother coming. The band are on a ferry going over to Amsterdam, and there were a group of West Ham football fans. There was a big West Ham game in Europe, and a fight had broken out between Oasis and the West Ham football fans on the boat. And it was sufficiently animated that Liam Gallagher got thrown into what do you call at the bottom of a boat where they got thrown into the brink underneath the boat and locked up and got sent back. So they never got to Europe. So the meeting I was meant to have with them didn't happen. And I'm sure that in the time it took for me to get my meeting with Noel, which happened a couple of weeks later, Alan was moving quickly to sign their publishing. So sadly, I didn't get to do the publishing deal.
But you're still friends.
I've always, you can't fall out with people in the music business, because it's something I've always said. A lot of people will go, oh, that lawyer really ripped me off, or that manager really ripped me off. I can never work with them, they're awful. And then the following week, that manager or that lawyer or that music publisher will turn up with another artist that you want to work with. And if you've said, I'm never working with you again, you're going to look a bit stupid when your boss is saying, you better talk to him because he's got something great. So no, I try not to fall out. When you make a decision to fall out with somebody in the music business, that is a really big decision, I think.
¿Entendéis más o menos lo que está diciendo? ¿Hace falta que haga una traducción breve o más o menos lo habéis pillado, no? Un resumen. Bueno, es complicado porque ha contado muchos detalles, ¿eh? Pero bueno, sintetizándolo mucho, se lo habéis entendido, que básicamente Alan llegó antes que él, que no tiene ningún problema con él por eso, que son amigos y no ha habido ningún problema en esto. Lo descubrieron en unos tiempos casi muy próximos uno del otro. En el caso de Alan fue en un pub de Glasgow. En Glasgow, cuando los descubrió, directamente sintió una energía especial con ellos, tanto por la composición como por el carácter de cada uno de ellos. Se sintió muy atraído por ellos y supo que ahí había algo interesante. Y paralelamente él estaba también persiguiendo grupos, estaba en una compañía, no recuerdo en qué compañía has dicho que estabas trabajando.
Sí. So I was EMI Publishing.
EMI, en EMI, estaba publicando en EMI. Y tuvo una aproximación también con ellos, y por poco tiempo, por una cuestión de una anécdota con un barco en el que partían de viaje y no pudo salir, algo muy accidental, fue lo que por azar hizo que realmente no llegara él a sellar este contrato, y se lo llevó Alan. Pero bueno, son muy colegas y todo bien, todo cool, como son ellos. Ahora, después de esta breve introducción, vamos a seguir charlando de muchas cosas, pero me gustaría volver a Alan, porque nos ha preparado un vídeo con una entrevista que le ha hecho Al, acerca de los temas principales que vamos a tratar esta tarde aquí. O sea que, si os parece, vamos a ver el vídeo con Alan y después comentamos. We are watching the video, Alan, with the interview with Alan, and then we will comment on the topics he's referring to. We can go.
be wrong, but I think it sold over 300,000 in the first in the first week. Do you know what I mean?
That's a lot.
Yeah, I mean that was a time though when we're living in a different time now. Though it's like, I mean, that's a time that everybody bought a CD. It was unbelievable.
Yeah.
You have to actually talk to somebody that never actually ever liked CDs.
Really?
But, yeah, never really liked them. But we sold so many of them. I mean, in the 90s, when it got to Morning Glory, we did something like 23 million worldwide. Probably 22 million of that was probably CDs. Do you know what I mean? Maybe it's a bit of vinyl, maybe there was some cassettes, but the reality is it was mainly CDs. Do you know what I mean? And it was an incredible time because people would buy the records. But in context, what Britain means to the economy now, I mean, in Europe, I mean, Oasis coming back, it's just monumental. Do you know what I mean? And I'd argue it's bigger now than it was then. Do you know what I mean?
Why? Do you have any theory about it?
Probably a couple. Probably our mutual friend Mike Smith. He's got kids. He tells his kids, "This is good." They, they're interested in what their cool dad likes, and that's probably a big part of it. So it's generational. Oasis, it's like the Beatles. It's like your kids like it, you like it, and probably the other thing is it's the internet. Ultimately, the reason there's such a big demand for the tickets is that you can go on a computer in Granada and apply for tickets at Wembley, or you can go on the computer in Granada and apply for tickets in Mexico City.
Yeah.
So the world's smaller, but the numbers are bigger. If that makes any sense, Charlie.
Yeah, massive sense. That's the live now. So did that take you by surprise? It probably did.
But the real money is out. The money isn't live now. There's no money in records, not really. Do you know what I mean? I mean, if you're Taylor Swift or you're your Ed Sheeran, then there's probably a lot of money in streaming. But I mean, I manage 12 different medium-sized acts, from Public Image to Ocean Colour Scene to the Happy Mondays. They're all pretty big acts. They can all do Brixton. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
The streaming revenue to all these bands is negligible. They all make a living alive. They all make a living out of merch.
Yeah.
Every 5 years you renew their publishing deal and they get a chunk of change again, which is pretty good.
Yeah.
The weak part of the whole equation is really, nobody really makes money out of streaming. Not in any real way. Do you know what I mean? Unless you are, unless you're Oasis or you're Madonna or you're Taylor Swift or you're Ed Sheeran, then you're probably making a lot of money. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. But that's millions, isn't it? Really. So the sort of difference between zero.
It pays so bad, it monetizes so badly. It's like 2 decimal points less than it was before. So, which has thrown the industry into difficulty, or it's changed the goalposts, I suppose.
It just changed. I don't think the industry's in difficulty at all. I think there's more money in it for the record companies and the publishing companies than there's ever been.
Yeah,
definitely record companies. But I think if you're like one of these medium-sized acts that I seem to keep getting presented with to be the manager, and I call it a Brixton Academy band, right? Which is pretty big. I mean, it's good size, right? It's 4,500 in London.
Is it more? Just 4? Yeah.
4.5 Brixton Academy.
Oh, okay.
But nobody's making any money out of streaming. I don't know anybody that actually is doing well. I mean, I speak to a friend, Andrew Innes in Primal Scream, and I said, "Do you make any money out of streaming?" And he went, "No." He goes, "Do you know anybody that makes money out of streaming?" And I went, "No." Maybe no probably does. Do you know what I mean? That's about it.
Yeah. So that leaves publishing as well. And I suppose publishing is that with Syncs.
Sings is great. I mean, like that's a huge revenue thing for everybody. But if you're talking about the actual streaming doesn't pay. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So that's like a major foundation of monetary income for everyone in an industry. So taken away. Do you know what I mean? So
it's just a different landscape now. Do you know what I mean?
yeah.
I mean, but then again, tickets in the 90s when all this was going on, you know, like the Britpop thing.
Yeah.
You know, tickets were cheap. Nobody made money out of touring.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Not really. Nobody really made money out of touring.
Yeah.
And now all the money's in touring. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Do you think touring could be a motor for the UK economy, which is what we're talking about in Cordoba? I mean, how would that monetize? How would that feed in? I suppose.
You're talking about what makes money for the Spanish economy. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, or the UK economy.
Well, the problem is that we've got this Brexit nonsense that's made it possible for a lot of our bands to go to Europe. Do you know what I mean? Because there's just so much. Well, you're in a band, you know. There's so much paperwork. Do you know what I mean?
Money, everything is it's horrific.
Yeah. So I'd say that before, when we were in the EEC, sorry, right, and it was European Community and or the EU as it became known as eventually, wasn't it? Yeah. But it's like, you know, and there was frictionless borders. I think it was great for us. We could go to Germany, play Germany, come back. It was seamless. Yeah. Now, every new country is a new set of rules, essentially. Yeah. And you wait at customs for 90 minutes. You probably do it all the time.
Yeah, I do remember. It was.
Yeah, and that's what it's like. It's went back to the 80s. You know, because I'm old, I'm 64, and I remember I used to tour with the Mary Chain in the 80s, and that's what it used to be like. We used to get Arnie, used to sit at customs, they used to go through it, took ages, and then
I remember.
You used to drag yourself through it, and it was a pain in it. And now we're back to that, except it's actually a longer wait. It's a load of European people that are pissed off with British people because they think that we all voted for Brexit. I mean, no, I think 30% of the people in Britain voted for Brexit, but it is what it is. I mean, it got through, didn't it? Do you know what I mean?
It's insane, incredible how that happened. And well, same with Trump and all these things. It's mad. It defies belief, you know.
But the only thing is, Trump get in. I mean, look, I don't support Trump. I'm not saying I do, right? Yeah. But Trump get in because the Democrats were so weak. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. That's how Keir Starmer got in England as well, because it's like the Tories were so weak. Yeah. When there's no opposition, you don't really need to be that. Do you know what I mean?
That's true. And you know, what is a democracy if you just got a choice between?
I don't even think Trump's that weak. I think Trump's Trump. You're either into him or you're not. I'm not into him, but I get why I could be into him. Do you know what I mean? And he just, you know, he is what he is. He's very strong, and he just is what he is. You either like it or you don't like it. I just don't want 4 more years of every single day Trump nonsense every day. But that's where we're heading now. You know what I mean? But I mean, he got in because Kamala was so weak, and Biden should never have been allowed to stand. I mean, Democrats are just a joke. They just a joke party. They just never got it together. Do you know what I mean?
That was a total mess. Yeah. To wind you back to politics and Blair, so famously, you were at 10.
Yeah.
Did Blair have a take on how big music could be and how it could power the economy?
Well, yeah, I think he obviously did. I mean, he jumped on the back of the Britpop thing and
he did.
Rode out of town and done very well with it, to be honest. And I don't think it was particularly Tony though. It was a woman in his cab, and a woman who was the general secretary of the Labour Party called. She's dead actually. She died of cancer a couple of years ago, but her name was Margaret McDonough, and she was the general secretary of the Labour Party. She saw it for what it was. And then Alistair Campbell was very, very clever as well, you know what I mean? And they got Tony on it, and that's what happened, you know what I mean? I like Blair. I actually really like Blair, you know what I mean?
Okay, sure. but it probably benefited him and the Labour Party at that time far more than it benefited you, or you know, in terms of Cool Britannia and it their market.
Well, I mean, I managed to. I'd never quite pissed the entire music business off. I'm talking about the higher echelons. I'm not talking about the people in the bands, right?
What are you doing wrong then?
I went to the 10 Downing Street with Noel, and I think people literally just thought he's just fucking got above his station now, and they were out to get me for about the next 10 years. You know what I mean?
Really? There was a lot of backlash with that. Oh God.
Yeah.
Okay.
I probably should never went just for a quiet life. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So, but I mean, thinking about this in terms of, you know, how he could have helped music and helped it power an economy. I mean, but there were no subsidies or anything from the government for people setting up labels or anything.
No, there wasn't subsidies, but there was. I got something through with the government, which was like, what was it called? New Deal for musicians, that they could sign up for be a musician and get an extra 10 quid. So you got 40 quid a week or something like that, or 50 quid a week.
I got that.
Well, there you go. I got that through for you. So there you go.
But it was that helps actually. But it was also like going to lectures on VAT returns and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Business. It was actually really, really useful. You know.
Yeah. Well, that's literally what I got through the Labour government. You know what I mean?
Well, they should.
I mean, it sounds arrogant as if I didn't really do that. I did do that.
Bloody hell. Well, that's amazing. And that
Google it. Google New Deal for musicians, and then you'll see it. Did it?
And that was you talking directly to.
I was on a task force called the Music Industry Task Force, and I got it passed, and I got it through government. Literally, I'm not taking the piss, mate. I did do it.
No. That's amazing.
I know it sounds so unbelievable, though. The government would wear it. Do you know what I mean? But they did.
Yeah. But look what return they got on that.
Yeah.
In terms of musicians who could eat and actually hone their craft, and you know.
Yeah.
And ultimately they got paid back in tax. You know what? Thousands of times over. You know.
Yeah.
What else was I going to ask you quickly, Alan? Was I suppose when you stepped in, doing creation, doing the Mary Chain right at the beginning, the Valentines, all that stuff, the primals before Oasis, there was a landscape that was very different, which was lots of indie labels, lots of distribution, music press, everything in place, or ish.
Yeah.
Does that exist now differently in terms of?
Yeah, I think it does, but I mean, I think it's just a different thing. I mean.
Yeah.
But there's I just think it's very, very hard for anybody to break through now. Do you know what I mean? I just think it's really difficult. I'm not sure I even know the way to go. You know, I know the if you're Public Image or you're the Happy Mondays, I know the route.
Yeah.
And I suppose why I'm the manager. But but I think if you're a young band, I'm the wrong guy. Do you know what I mean?
Okay. In terms of, because you're doing live stuff with those bands mainly.
Yeah, but we make records. I mean, Public Image will make a new record, and Happy Mondays hopefully one day will make a new record. Ocean Colours will make a new record. Cast are making another record with your friend in February. Okay.
But in terms of you sort of powering them on and them being a success, those records really are to hang a tour on?
Yeah, they're there to make the bands a bit bigger and to tour. That's what the records are there for. I mean, the last Cast album went in at 22, the View album went in at 6, Cast have just got the Oasis tour. You have to think that's going to maybe give them a #1 album next year, do you know what I mean? So that's what's going on, you know what I mean?
Cool. And in terms of places like America and Europe, strong there as well?
No, I don't. I think there's things that I'm involved in. You know, I don't think America's particularly interested. Although I've got Stereo MCs going out in January, doing 3 shows, and they just got the Jimmy Fallon show at the beginning of January.
Brilliant.
And I've got Jonestown, who are an American rock band. They're going out at the end of next year, and then Public Image will go out in America the year after.
Okay, cool. So it's happening internationally as well. Yeah.
I bet. I mean, I think my business is Europe and Australia. We're a tiny wee bit of America with some of the bands. Do you know what I mean? Jonestown's got an American career, definitely. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And a UK.
Public Image have got a bit of an American career.
Yeah.
I don't think any of the others have, actually. Maybe Stereotypes have because of the syncs. They get synced as well. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. And so it's difficult now. It's difficult to break new bands. All of these bands that have been around for a while, they've got a brand, if you like.
Yeah.
And what's so difficult about breaking a new band now? I mean, apart from...
I think do people want a band?
Yeah.
And then I don't even know if I know how to do it anymore. I mean, it's totally changed. You know what I mean?
Totally.
I mean, if I do it again and I break a new band, then I'll tell you that I can do it. But I haven't done it for a long time, and I think it's very. I'm talking about not talking about old bands.
Yeah, new bands.
Having albums. I'm talking about a new band that you find in a club, and then you put the record out, and then you make them big. I don't think I know. You know what I mean?
What about Forgotten Pharaohs that we saw?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm putting that out, but I mean, I'm not. It's not as if I've broken them. Do you know what I mean?
Okay. But you're behind it. You're pushing.
Yeah, well, I'm putting it out because it's like, you know, I love that band and I'm putting the record out, but I'm not sure. I mean, but they're old as well, man. I mean, Christian's 50. You know what I mean?
Okay. Time to get the hair dye out and the.
He's actually got ginger red long hair. He's like the ginger Michael Hutchins.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
Yeah.
He's going to do all right because he looks good, you know.
No,
all right, Alan. That's fantastic. That's
all right.
That's perfect for Cordoba. Thanks so much, and that'll help us get the ball.
Yeah, and I'll have to send me when I'm coming over. Is it 28th?
Yeah, I think so. To Pamplona.
Yeah.
I think so. Let me double check, and I'll get back.
Yeah,
to
just
you.
let me know when I'm doing, and I'll have a good. And I'm flying into Bilbao, haven't I?
To Biarritz.
Biarritz.
Biarritz in France. Yeah.
Oh right, okay, right.
Yeah, it's quicker. And
all right, okay, all right. Just tell me what to do, and I'll book it. All right. Okay.
All right, Alan.
Go. See you.
I hope to see you in Spain sometime.
Bye.
Take it easy.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye now. Ciao.
Streaming doesn't pay, says Alan. What do you think about that?
I agree with him completely. I mean, I've watched as a musician my royalties lose, I don't know, about maybe, by 2 decimal points, it doesn't pay. So it's like 100th, maybe in some cases. I mean it, I'm not exaggerating.
What about you? What do you think?
I think streaming pays if you're streaming in the region of 1 million streams, multiple millions of streams every month. But for the majority of musicians out there, you're not getting anything like that. And so there's no substantial income coming from it. But if you own the recordings and maybe you own your own publishing and you are getting a reasonable number of streams, then there is an income to be got there. But for 1 million streams, that actually equates to somewhere in the region of £5,000 sterling of income. 4,000 for records, 1,000 for the songwriter for publishing. The problem is, the record company usually takes about 80% of that. So immediately the artist is down, of 1 million streams, they're getting £800. So if you actually own your recordings, you're doing okay. You've got 1 million streams, you're getting maybe £4,000. But unfortunately, the record companies are doing okay. The actual recording artists aren't doing very well. And that's 1 million. You know, most artists, you know, they're lucky if they get 100,000, 200,000, 300,000 streams. So it is tough. But obviously, the big artists, the Ed Sheerans, the Taylor Swifts, the Charlie XCXs, you know, the Sabrina Carpenters, they're doing fine. So if you're at the top of the game, you're doing really well, but the middle and the bottom are really suffering. Is that fair?
What's your opinion about streaming? Does it pay? What do you think?
There's an interesting statistic I read yesterday. I think for the first time, there are more releases on Spotify in one day than the entire year of 2006 or something. I remember when they got to 20,000 releases in one day a year or two ago, and I thought, wow, how do you get through that? But now it's probably like, you know, 200,000 a day. So apart from the fact that Spotify and the algorithm doesn't work for the artist, as Mike points out, only artists who own their own recordings can benefit from that, but without major endorsement and backing, they're not going to become major artists unless they're big on YouTube straight away or something. And few are, but it's a tiny percentage. In the arts, it's always been a tiny percentage. In art school, for writers, for music composers, less than 2% of any of those kids at college conservatoires will ever go on to sell a single piece of work. And it's been like that since the 60s. So in some ways, that's not any different. But with the business model now being, and the algorithm so tough, no wonder many kids are just not bothering with music and going into other areas. But you can find the same inequity and in art. An art gallery will take 80%. You know, same as Spotify. So, I know many musicians who gave up music because they didn't like the business to go into art, and now they're realizing art is even worse. So I think the point I'm making is that it's always been really, really hard. It's always been a situation where you're more likely to fail than succeed by 1,000%. So if you are going to go into those areas of creativity, you really need to calibrate your intuition and your intentions clearly, and rather than just float. And if you go in with strong intention, and you go in with the philosophy of, I'm going to exploit this industry for what I need it to do, rather than allow yourself to be exploited by that industry for what it wants you to do, then you're already winning. And you're not reliant and dependent on that industry. And if you make your art beautiful enough, you will sell it, and the industry will come to you, and you can determine the terms of engagement on your terms. And again, that's always been the case, and I think it's more so now, when there's even less of an industry now. The leaders of the industry, the head of BMG, all those people, they're not even accountants, they're hedge funders. They work in finance. They're not interested in nurturing fertile land for 5 years, 10 years. They're interested in returns now. So their focus is on catalogs, BMG didn't have an A&R department for a few years recently. They're just not interested. They don't know what to do with it anyway. So they'll only sign artists if they're already getting big stats and numbers themselves, and then they can make that bigger. But the idea that you can walk in with a demo and get a deal now is absolutely ridiculous. They just don't have people there to listen to it. They're not interested. So that whole industry is gone, and it's become a nostalgia catalogue industry. And where the cutting edge is with young artists working in collectors, communities, working with Bitcoin, working with blockchain, doing things on their terms, finding cheap studios, cheap areas, cheap communities where they can survive with very little. Finding rundown cities that have no culture or scene, and working with their communities to give them cheap rent, like they've been doing in Detroit, like they did in Berlin, like they did in East London, and creating like hipster enclaves really for creatives and artists where they can afford to live and collectively.
You've created them. You said you've created them?
No, I didn't create.
I misunderstood.
I think that was
your
KLF,
last,
wasn't
your
it?
last bit.
KLF created East London hipsters through the Foundry.
The artists,
But
they go where it is really
no, there's some councils, like in Detroit, will give in old industrial estates over free rent, free, no cost, no bills for 2-3 years. Development areas to give people a break to move there and take things over. Then you just need Jack White to open a record shop and a barista, and you've got a happening tourist destination for a few years. That's the model now.
Bueno, resumiendo mucho, todos han dicho que efectivamente que el streaming no paga, evidentemente no están de acuerdo, solamente para las grandes bandas, como ya nos decía Alan. En el caso de las pequeñas se tienen que buscar la vida. Youth nos decía ahora mismo que le entristece un poco ver por qué los chavales jóvenes no se meten tanto en la música, porque no se lo ponen fácil, porque todo cuesta mucho dinero. La manera de hacerlo, según dice él, es creer en lo que haces. Si tienes un buen producto, si eres un buen artista y tienes una buena obra, un buen disco, vea por ello y búscate la vida con la comunidad, con el apoyo de la comunidad, buscando sitios baratos y tratando de financiarlo de una manera un poco más asequible. Pero sí, están de acuerdo con Alan, absolutamente. I would love to go back to the main theme of this talk, which is the explosion of the Britpop while Blair government. Tell us about that. How was the whole thing come along? Was it the Britpop exploding and Blair taking over that situation, or he pushed it into the world the way it was?
Was that Tony Blair?
Yeah.
I think Tony Blair and the people around him were very savvy, and they could see the value of co-opting a sense of what young people were excited about as a means of getting young people interested in politics. It also made them seem like a fresh, exciting, new, glamorous form of politics, as opposed to the established Conservative Party, who had been in power for, God, was it about 14, 15 years by that point? It was since Thatcher, so it would have been about, 15, 16 years, who were very old, grey men, whereas the Labour Party at that time seemed much younger. There were a lot of quite cool women in the movement. When Alan mentions one of them, there was another incredible woman, Mo Molan, who was a great fan of music, who was in the Labour Party cabinet when they came to power. She looked after Northern Ireland. It was very much, it was definitely cynical co-opting if we associate ourselves with pop stars. It will make us, in exactly the same way that the Democrats have done, going, if we associate ourselves with Beyonce and with Springsteen, people will vote for us. I don't know if that trick necessarily would work now. I think a lot of people look at pop stars and go, they're part of a privileged elite. or a privileged liberal elite. But certainly in the 90s, they were just, I think it made the Labour Party seem more youthful, more hipper, more exciting, more in touch with the kids than the established party. But it's interesting because I was working with Blur at the time, and they were approached by Tony Blair, and they didn't get involved because they felt, musicians shouldn't be getting involved with established politics. I think it is good for musicians to have strong political beliefs. It is important for musicians to stand for something. But as soon as a musician gets involved with a politician, they need to understand that they're going to get used by that politician to make that politician look sexy, look cool, look good. And ultimately it will never play well for that musician. And I think all of those musicians that went through the door of Number 10 because they were excited to be close to this new government all felt a bit foolish when, unfortunately, the Labour government took us into war in Iraq in a way that it shouldn't have done. So there was, I would suggest that it is never a good thing necessarily to be going hand in hand with the government and with the Prime Minister if you're a musician.
Bueno, ha comentado esta situación del gobierno de Blair y concretamente ahora estaba comentando que él estaba con el grupo Blur cuando Blair los llamó para trabajar, para apostar por ellos, y que definitivamente el grupo se negó, dijo que no quería formar parte de una asociación con el gobierno, aunque fuera laborista, porque era una manera de mezclarse con la política y que eso nunca ha llevado a un artista por un buen camino, que él piensa realmente que la política y el arte nunca debería estar mezclado porque te resta libertad al artista para comportarse y para ser quien es. Entonces, bueno, de esa manera lo ve él, pero también apunta que hubo muchos grupos que se aproximaron mucho al número 10 de Downing Street, a la presidencia del gobierno en ese tiempo, con Tony Blair, cuando abrió los brazos a la... Y muchos de ellos se sintieron totalmente decepcionados cuando el país entró en la guerra de Irak. Fue una gran decepción y bueno, pues había una apuesta ahí que por eso él piensa que se debe mantener al margen la política y el arte. What do you think about this topic? Might art be separated from politics, or should help at some stage to grow up?
I'd agree with Mike that it's very rare that you can get involved with political parties and look good. But I'd also say that everything you do, all art, is all political. You can't avoid it. And you make your choices, and it's important to be political as well. But not essential. I mean, different kinds of politics, aren't there? Nowadays, there's gender politics, there's many ways you can make a statement politically through your art. But to actually align to a party, I was trying to think in the 60s if anybody aligned to the political parties in America that brought the end of the Vietnam War. I think what's the lesson there is what brought down the government and the Vietnam War in the 70s was counterculture. And counterculture, often political, but often just culture. And culture that is counter to the established norms. And in a sense, the thing that kick-started the countercultural revolution, the Summer of Love, were actually the art slabs around London and in America that brought a lot of different tribes of artists together. I actually started an art slab in South London about 7-8 years ago with the simple of intention of helping to facilitate another countercultural Summer of Love. And the best way to do that was to do it through an art slab. Certainly you could get a lot more people, a lot more things achieved than you could with a band. nevertheless, bands are great ways and great facilitators of social change. But I think, you know, if you look at an artist like Dylan, who's often cited as being political or politicized, but has never acknowledged that or never explained any of his songs, actually. And yet, many of the songs became countercultural anthems of anti-nuclear war, anti-war. But he may not necessarily have wrote them with that intention. And the reason why he's done so well is because he didn't talk about politics, but he wrote poetry. And in the same way, many of the great poets, whether it's Leonard Cohen or Lorca, will tell us about who we are far better than a politician ever can. In many ways, art is always, has been, always will be, way, way more powerful than politics in terms of facilitating social change and actually reflecting where the people feel poetry. So I often encourage artists and my kids to be poetic more than political.
Ha hecho una reflexión muy poética acerca de que realmente los artistas, el arma que tienen es la contracultura que hacen a través de sus canciones y cómo se expresan de una manera poética, pueden alcanzar ideas y combatir la política de una manera mucho más poética y elegante sin entrar directamente en el terreno político, y esa es la que a él le interesa, la parte que el artista puede hacer sin necesariamente asociarse con la política, que opina igual que Mike. También comentaba que así tenemos las letras de los grandes poetas como Leonard Cohen, que transmitían muchísimo con lo que decían y no necesariamente estaban llamando a las cosas directamente por su nombre, sino de una manera mucho más elevada, que es la voz del artista, debe ser poeta. We were talking also with Alan about Trump. How do you think this could affect the whole music industry, not only with the ideology, but
What?
no, the Trump triumph? How can Trump,
Trump.
that guy? Yeah.
He's just another clown with a finger on the nuclear button. He's no better. He's no worse than Putin, is he? It's unreal that those are our leaders. But I don't know if they're any better or worse than any of those. Look at Tony Blair. People had hope with Tony Blair, and he sent us to war. I think that kind of politics is just for TV now and media. It's who actually runs the world? It's arms manufacturers and the lobbyists and people we don't know. And so actually it's down to the rest of us, every individual, every person, to contribute to society in the way they would like to see. And it's always been that, really. You can't, politicians always let you down. They're always corrupted by power, whether they're communist or fascist. Look at Stalin, look at Hitler, always, to a greater or lesser degree. And even the good ones, when they get to power, do terrible things. Maybe it's a philosophy we have to embrace to accommodate that unfortunate reality. But actually focusing on the individuals is pointless, futile, I think. It's much better to focus on your own self and community and live your life regardless of them. But I don't know, what do you think?
I think, as I search for positives from Trump's election, it is the fact that he does stir up such strong emotions, such a strong energy, frequently negative energy, is that energy you can hopefully channel into art. And I do believe that creativity and artistry and poetry can actually achieve more than politics, you know. So I see it as a means by which hopefully a new groundswell of protest and rebellion will be fostered in opposition to what he is, what he represents, what his group of friends represent, that billionaire class. I try and be really optimistic and look towards the future. I actually think the one good thing, you know, it seems crazy that we worry about Trump when the planet's on fire. That's far more worrying for humanity than Trump's election. He's part of it, and the fact that our home is on fire will hopefully encourage everybody to come together and realize that we have a common problem and we need to deal with it. So I try and have an optimistic view of the future, but unfortunately, at the moment, it just feels like the very rich are building rockets to take them away from this planet that's on fire, as opposed to figuring out how we put the fire out. But I think as we all figure out how to put the fire out, how to deal with these extreme right-wing politicians in America and in Europe, it actually brings people closer together, and we can, I hope, see that we have far more in common than some of those politicians would try and make us out and say that we're actually different and we should be fighting each other. But I am by nature an optimistic individual, so.
People have the power.
People always have the power,
Yeah.
yeah.
What your original question was
Well, how the Trump triumph can affect, anyhow, not only ideologically, but the music industry or the whatever you.
far more important is what artificial intelligence is going to do to the music industry, I think, seriously, and how that's going to change it. I mean, the means of production, distribution, exchange have all changed radically, and they're changing still, and that's, I mean, I'm quite terrified by that. I know you can use AI positively as well, but I think any technology will be abused, you know, more perhaps, you know. That's my opinion, beyond politics, you know.
Hemos saltado de Trump a la inteligencia artificial. Bueno, ellos decían que no hay que Trump es un payaso, que no hay que fijarse en él, que es un tipo, bueno, es terrible que estemos hablando de él, que nos importe tanto lo que está pasando. Decía Mike que con el mundo ardiendo nos estamos fijando en un tipo como este y que él cree mucho más importante la capacidad que tenemos todos, tanto de allí como de aquí, de unirnos y hacer una rebelión, ¿no?, contra este tipo de movimiento político que no lleva a ningún lugar y que está dejando de lado lo más importante, que es lo que está pasando en todo nuestro entorno, el entorno climático y mundial en el que vivimos de guerra, ¿no? Y al preguntarle a Alan sobre este tema, hablaba sobre la inteligencia artificial. Él está mucho más aterrado por la inteligencia artificial que por lo que pueda traer un gobierno de Trump, todo lo que pueda acarrear, ¿no? Would you like to comment on IA?
Artificial intelligence?
AI. Yeah, I mean, we've kind of had it for years, haven't we? I mean, in a way. Out of those 200,000 tracks that were released today on Spotify, a good 40% are AI generated. So what the big labels, including Spotify, do is they have robot writers that pick a hit and then do an AI version of it, so that when you play the hit, the algorithm suggests you then play the AI versions that are sound-alikes, and they make millions from pretending to be real. I mean, they're already fleecing the real artists, and now they're putting fake ones up there to take what's left of the crumbs as well. Yeah, so I don't know. But the exciting thing about AI is a bit like sampling in the 80s. It's not really covered legally. Yeah, so you can do what you like with it, which is quite exciting. And some of the AI videos, ASAP Rocky video, was mind-blowing. I mean, some filmmakers and people are doing some really clever stuff. young creatives will do some really clever music with it as well. I haven't heard any yet, but they will. But we've been using drum machines since the 70s, so drum machine is AI. We love it, you know. So inherently I don't have a problem with it, apart from the apocalypse side of it. But, but I think it's worth the pump. It's happening, isn't it? You can't stop it. It's like how you use it. Again, your intentions are important. But I think it could be clever because you could use, depending on who's got the biggest supercomputer, you can always build another AI that can compete with the other AI. And eventually maybe defeat it. You'll have AI wars. Eventually the AI, whatever it is, will be clever enough to get rid of us.
But I mean, again, this is. I think what you said was really true about the amount of AI on Spotify. I mean, especially, you know, so much of what is listened to on Spotify is background music. It is music to sleep, or it's acoustic guitar music, or it's I want to listen to calm. I will listen to a calm playlist. And an awful lot of the music on that calm playlist you've never heard of before, because as you said, it's written by robots who are signed to Spotify. So Spotify is the one that's making all the money from so much of the music that's actually being streamed.
What's ironic is in universities, students will use AI to critique their thesis, to send it in. Tutors and teachers will use AI to market. Eventually they'll get rid of the middleman. You know, and they'll just do it themselves. But you know, it's an empty chamber where Spotify's talking to itself through its own AI-generated music that's getting ridiculous numbers, but all on the back of us. Yeah. We're basically the slaves for that algorithm, and fund it to billions. So we can hear itself talking to itself. And we know this anyway. Everybody knows what's going on, but nobody knows what to do about it.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily recommend listening to those playlists. You know, listen to.
But kids, that's what they listen to playlists. They don't listen to albums.
That's it, and they will listen to liquid drum and bass.
Yeah.
So like instead of going out and listening to an artist that you've maybe seen in a club, or you've heard on the radio. Most kids don't listen to radio. You just click on a hybrid drum and bass or liquid drum and bass playlist, where half the stuff there will be recommended to you, and it's probably not made by real artists. And so I would always advocate, try and, you know, like the food you eat on the table, for God's sake, don't eat processed shit.
Yeah.
Try and find proper food.
In the future, kids will be clever, and they won't buy or listen to AI music. They'll do what they do in Berlin and East London. They'll buy refined barista coffee, and they'll pay a bit more for it. But because of that, and because it's been brought over on a sail ship rather than diesel trucks, they'll pay more for it. Eventually, people won't buy new clothes. They will just buy upcycled clothes that will be made by or remade by the big manufacturers and fashion houses. Eventually, we will learn, and already we're way more knowledgeable and discerning with music because of the internet. That allows Alice Coltrane to be #1 in the album charts from being a tiny niche. Those things become more easier to discover and blow up faster and have an influence positively. And that will happen, and is happening with food and every part of the process we have with life, for sure.
Bueno, están en contra de toda la música procesada que se transmite a través de Spotify. Consideran que es un gran enemigo en ese sentido, porque lo que te traduce, te manda listas que la gente escucha, y es música procesada que realmente la gente no va a buscar un artista en concreto, sino que le dan ya algo hecho. Y eso, hay que ir contra eso y buscar realmente, decía Mike, igual que tú buscas la comida que comes, tienes que buscar también la comida que escuchas y buscar al artista.
But also, I mean, people don't want to see AI perform. People still want to see human beings perform. They still want that energy in a room and that interaction. And again, I think big business is trying to shut that down, and companies like Live Nation actually don't want small venues out there. You know, they want to just keep funneling people into stadiums, paying huge ticket prices, and not have them going to small venues. But I think people genuinely do still want to have that interaction with human beings. So I think the future is okay for you.
Well, thank God.
You're right. But, you know, I think the future, you know, AI is really good at producing somewhat generic music, I think. So the people that have maybe made a living for writing fairly generic music for television, for yoga playlists, for meditation playlists, for them it is over. But if you are in, you know, AI will get rid of people that write messages for birthday and Christmas cards, but AI isn't going to get rid of people that write books of poetry. So I think it's all about producing work of quality, producing the best work of quality, and if that is what it is always about, then I think you have a future and you can survive. But if you are just trying to do something generic to appeal to a mass audience to make money, AI will do that much better than you can.
Bueno, básicamente que la inteligencia artificial puede ser muy útil para hacer cosas genéricas, sin alma, como decimos aquí, sin alma, pero evidentemente donde esté una persona que escriba algo y que le ponga su sentido y su alma de nuevo a lo que escribe, pues no tiene nada que ver. Hay que apostar por eso y hay que apostar por los conciertos pequeños, dice. Las grandes compañías tratan de evitar que nos juntemos y que nos reunamos en conciertos de tamaño medio donde puedas alternar con la gente, como se ha hecho siempre, y vender grandes eventos en una sala llena en la que casi, bueno, venderlo a través de un streaming o de o hacerlo de otra manera que no tienes contacto con la gente, y él aboga porque se vuelva a ese tipo de conciertos. Are you a kind of nostalgic for the time you lived? With the concerts you experienced, the industry you experienced, the people.
I don't think you could do it again now like that then, you know, and like what Alan was saying is, you know, the CDs don't really exist anymore now, you know, so that's changed things massively as well. Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, can bands break through now in a similar way to then?
No, I think it is much harder to break through from a grassroots to being a superstar. I mean, you can see it in the last 5 years, hardly any new artists have broken through to a really big level in the UK in comparison with the 1990s, where it felt that they were breaking through every 2 or 3 months. There'd be a new act.
But there's a different model now, so
Yeah.
there's many more acts that aren't breaking through but are making a comfortable living.
They can make a living.
Selling 1,000 CDs, 2,000 vinyl, a few cassettes, their own T-shirts. You can survive doing that if you build it and without being part of the industry. CD sales go up every year actually. Cassette sales go up. So I mean, maybe that's just nostalgia a little bit, but they're also convenient. You know, sort of delivery systems.
Yeah.
Cassettes and CDs. I still use them a lot. You know, I think it's like bands that are doing that, artists that are doing that as a small independent, then working with other collectives as bigger distribution, bigger events. You can make things happen. You can build festivals out of that. You can make a living out of that. You can't look to the industry for that anymore. but you can make artifacts, you can make CDs, vinyl, yourself, and you can sell them at your gigs. And people will support you doing that.
It's so much more important, I think, as Youth says, about more artists making a sustainable living for themselves. You know, the idea that you want to go out and be like Oasis, that is not a good thing. Most of the members of Oasis didn't want to be in Oasis. You know, it ended up with just Noel and Liam in Oasis. You know, the other, Tony McCarroll, the original drummer, got kicked out. But the other two quit the band because they couldn't handle it. You know, being a huge rock star is, the kind of job that very, very, very few people on the planet are suitable for. It is like trying to be President of the United States. And, you've got to be insane to do a job like that. It is unbelievably hard. And the good thing about people aiming towards a more sustainable career in music, where they're just making a living, as opposed to wanting to own a huge house and become globally famous, just to make a living means that you will actually stay sane and I think have a much better life. So many of the big artists that I worked with in the 90s suffered terrible mental health problems. Luckily, they all came through it and survived, but a lot of them didn't continue making music. And I think that is a shame. And I often see different models, particularly in Europe, where it's much better to grow old and be happy and continue to make music, to continue to paint or write, to be creative. I think that is the important thing, and to find a sustainable way of doing it, as opposed to trying to be as rich and famous as possible, is what is important. And that is the big companies only want you to be a global superstar. They are not interested in you having a sustainable, job.
Dice que cree que lo más interesante es que los grupos se mantengan, también lo apuntaba Youth, se mantengan con sus propios medios en una medida que sea sostenible para sus vidas, que puedan hacer artefactos, CDs, merchandising, cosas que les permita vender en los conciertos y sea una manera de sostenerse y mantener su vida como músicos de esa manera. Y que le parece mucho más saludable esta fórmula que optar por la de las grandes compañías de grupos como Oasis, que en su día, el éxito fulgurante que tuvieron, dice Mike que eso no lo puede soportar nadie, que se fueron 2 personas del grupo, que eso es un ritmo absolutamente matador y que de hecho tiene muchos conocidos, muchos compañeros de la música de esos años que han acabado con problemas mentales, que es un problema bastante habitual y que afortunadamente están intentando salir de ahí, muchos de ellos, pero que realmente llevan una vida mucho más insana y más difícil que la gente que aquí en Europa, por ejemplo, bandas más pequeñas, se buscan la vida y con poco se mantienen, consiguen vivir de ello y hacer buenos números para llevar una vida sana y saludable. What about the Brexit nonsense? What do you think about that? Big topic.
I mean, if you're a musician and you want to go, if you American bands coming to England now, Mike, what do they have to do? How many forms do they have to fill out?
Too many.
And extra tax to pay on top.
It's 500 quid for American to get a visa to work in the UK, and it's 5 grand or 2,000 or 3,000 for a UK citizen to get a work visa.
2,000 or 3,000 to go and work in America. So, I mean, most bands can't afford to tour in America. And what about Europe? I mean,
well, you can work up to 90 days, but
90 days.
But obviously, it doesn't help. It doesn't help musicians. It's been a disaster, Brexit. But it's again, that was the end of democracy. Really, as Boris closed Parliament, pushed Brexit through. It was kind of like getting rid of democracy, pushing it through, and leaving us where we're at, which is isolated.
And the British people didn't care. We had a Prime Minister in England who shut down the Parliament so that he could get Brexit through. The last person who shut down Parliament was Charles I, and he was beheaded.
Yeah.
And so that is what it should have happened to Boris Johnson.
Yeah.
I mean, luckily he did get kicked out, but the thing is, the British people, they just didn't care.
The propaganda was so strong,
Yeah.
and the blame on all of our problems was so firmly placed on immigration. People still think it's a good idea because of that propaganda and misinformation. So that's the scariest part of it.
Yeah. That is why I moved to Europe, because of Brexit. I just didn't want to be part of a country that felt that way, and I really felt that half of the people that I lived with were of a very different mindset to me, and I just didn't like that conversation. I felt European. I did not feel English anymore. Luckily, I have Irish heritage, so I have an Irish passport, so I was able to move to Spain. But it's, you know, I'm very lucky I was able to do that. You know, a lot of people can't, most people can't do that. But it was the worst political decision that happened in my lifetime, and I watched the richest and most powerful people in the country basically steal the country from the people that live there.
And the politicians like it, on all the parties, they like the idea of it because they can rewrite the rules. So there's very little chance of it being reversed in the near future. So yeah, it's a crazy world.
Están comentando que obviamente el Brexit ha sido una gran faena para todos, que cuesta carísimo para un músico ir a Estados Unidos y que es tan caro que ya ni siquiera lo intentan muchos de ellos, ¿no? Mike comentaba que es una de las razones por las que él se ha venido a vivir a España. Tengo que comentaros que los tres están prácticamente viviendo en España. Al estaba en Pamplona, se está viniendo a Málaga, Mike vive en Málaga y Youth tiene bastante relación con Granada, con la provincia de Granada, donde tiene un estudio, con lo cual los tres están viniendo a España. Y en gran motivado por el Brexit, porque les ha expulsado. Decía Mike que a Boris Johnson tendrían que haberle cortado la cabeza por la decisión que tomó y que es incomprensible, que no tiene ningún sentido, que él se siente europeo y que, bueno, por suerte tiene origen irlandés y que él puede volver pero decidió venirse a Málaga porque su país con esta política no le representa y no quería estar con gente que pensara de esa manera. We hope you won't have to go somewhere else.
Yeah,
From Spain to somewhere else. The world is very hectic in this moment. Who knows?
Maybe with Vox, the Vox party, they will.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Well, we are open the microphone to the public to see if you want to make any question to them. I would love to have some anecdotes also from your 90s. You can tell us about any gossip interesting from the groups you've been signing and working with. And vosotros podéis ir pensando preguntas por si queréis hacerle. Le he preguntado que nos haga algún...
But there's a question.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Vale.
Hey.
Sí, ahora. Hello, for you. I want to ask about nowadays about the importance of social network. I know from very musicians, a lot of musicians nowadays, you have to be on Instagram, have many followers, work on that even more than on your music, just to be to be out there with your music. You have to be there. What do you think about social network, Instagram, Facebook, and all that stuff? How important nowadays is for, you know that? You have Facebook, I know.
Yeah. I'm quite active. It is very important. You can ignore it. There are some bands who ignore it, but nobody knows who they are. What you have to do with social media is like what I was saying, what you have to do with the music business is you have to go in with your clear intentions of what you're going to do with it and exploit it to do and facilitate that. So you're there to promote your music, you're there to maybe provide an opinion of what you think about things, to open up yourself to the world a little bit, and hopefully people will end up, you know, buying your work, your art. Certainly for me, with music, my own personal music, my art, it's been fantastic. I wouldn't have sold any of it without it. And it means you can circumnavigate the industry, because if you can blow up on social media now, you don't need the industry, and the industry will come to you, and you can dictate it on your terms. And I think the good thing about that is that if you're doing interesting content and feeds that are real, then they shine brightly against all the plastic pop that's out there, and people will follow you and take notice. And again, that comes down to your intention and how good a communicator you are at that. But again, you don't want to be spending all day just writing social media posts. You want to be doing what you do as an artist. But I think the amazing thing about it is it's free, and it gives you the kind of promotion you would have only been able to get if you paid a few £100,000 to a marketing company, or a major label would lend you that money to promote your record. Now you can do it for free yourself, and it's more effective. So in many ways it's incredible. In other ways it's very addictive and can steal your life and turn you into a slave for an algorithm. So you've got to find the balance carefully, I think, and not get too drawn in. But yeah, it's a good thing.
Responde brevemente que no le parecen mal las redes, son de hecho muy útiles porque uno puede montar su carrera a través de ellas de una manera muy sencilla, saliéndose un poco de la industria, siendo gratis y libre, lo puede hacer todo el mundo, pero lo que no le gusta tanto es que crea adicción y que, bueno, pues a veces te conviertes en un esclavo de tus propias redes, y eso, bueno, pues tampoco le interesa ni le parece que sea lo más saludable. Hay que encontrar un equilibrio.
I agree with everything Keith said. The important thing is make it work for you, but you know, if you are not using social media, you need to find some other way to get out and get yourself heard. And so many people are relying on social media to discover music. So that is the means of communication. But the more authentic your post, the more quality your post, then the more likely you're going to reach people. Keep focused on your art. Your art is the most important thing. And don't get distracted by social media. Don't get sucked into social media. As you said, make it work for you. Don't you start working for them. But I use it all the time. I love it as a means of communicating, especially as I have a lot of friends all around the world. It's a way of me feeling connected to all of them, and as a means of getting my own art out into the world. I think it is a good thing, and if you know how to use it properly, it is a great way of being able to sell your music, your poetry, your literature, your art to the world. It is a good thing.
Mike está completamente de acuerdo con lo que decía Jude, cree que es una herramienta muy útil y muy práctica, pero lo importante es siempre la calidad de lo que tú haces, del arte que creas, ya sea poesía, literatura, música, lo que sea de calidad, y realmente guiarse por eso. El patrón debe ser guiarse por eso, y además en función de las publicaciones que haces, si realmente cuidas esa publicación y la haces con atención y con calidad, esa interacción con la gente que te sigue va a ser mucho más interesante, porque bueno, realmente están siguiendo lo que tú pones tuyo y que tiene más sentido que algo genérico o que no hayas hecho tú. Al, ¿tú quieres comentar?
I just think it's really funny that TikTok, you know, I'm a teacher as well, like 5 years ago was a dance program for kids, you know, to dance, and now it's like the major social media network. how did that happen? You know, it's quite bizarre. And all that information, where is it going? Because it's not free, because they are taking information and lots of it, and what are they doing to it? I know I sound like a conspiracy theorist. I am.
But that's because you are.
Dice que lo que está diciendo suena como la teoría de la conspiración, pero bueno, que realmente se plantea qué ha pasado con Twitch, que al principio eran todo vídeos de gente bailando y haciendo un poco el tonto, cosas muy infantiles, y de repente es el canal por el que todo el mundo parece que se informa y todo pasa por ahí. Se plantea que quién está cogiendo todos esos datos y hacia dónde va toda esa información.
It's true, it starts out as a platform to show videos of your cat jumping around, and it ends up on a platform that shows you how to make an atomic bomb.
Yes.
So yeah, it is dangerous. You were right to be worried. But it is, you know, like all of these things, like alcohol, like guns, you know, they have uses.
But we can all dance better now, though,
Yeah,
as well.
we can dance better, and I know a lot more about other people's cats and what they eat for lunch.
Está bromeando con los vídeos de gatos que tanto se han visto, que se ha pasado de ahí a hablar de la bomba atómica, y bueno, pues que ahora él conoce mucho más acerca de la vida de los gatos. ¿Tenéis alguna pregunta? Sí, por allí.
Hola, ¿qué tal? Yo no lo voy a hacer en inglés, Javi, perdona. Quería saber hasta qué punto opinan ellos que es importante a día de hoy la infraestructura local para el desarrollo de las bandas.
At what stage do you think is important the infrastructure of the local area you live in towards the growth of the bands, local bands? How important the infrastructure of the local city is for the bands local?
You mean like the council and the arts councils?
Well, the infrastructure, the salas, ¿te refieres? O? Pero entonces no te refieres a infraestructuras. The scene, okay, the scene. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Without a scene, you haven't got anything. So you've got to create a scene. How do you create a scene? It starts with 2 or 3 people taking over a bar and playing music that they want to hear, or starting an arts lab, or building a community, joining a choir, taking over the church and starting a choir, putting on a little festival of local music and inviting outsider musicians in, doing workshops, doing conferences like this, introducing people to each other. I do a little festival in Granada, 600-700 people. So many creative things have come out of that through the interaction of local musicians and international musicians. Really what the arts scene should be doing, and it's much better here and in France and in UK in terms of supporting local art and community, is providing more funds, more cheap spaces, like I was saying in Detroit, and giving artists, musicians tax cuts, free, so they don't have to pay any tax, and giving them spaces, giving them late licenses, giving them permission to put on festivals and happenings that create a chemistry between everyone involved, and different arts, poetry, music, painting, literature. Usually there's separado, bring them all in, get them interacting, for sure, without a doubt, a scene will create.
Comenta que sin escena no hay nada. Hay que tener una escena y que hay que crearla como sea. Se puede crear entre 2 colegas que creen un bar, entre una comunidad que se reúna para hacer algo. Comentaba que él en Granada hace un encuentro anual que se reúnen unas 700 personas y que se genera un clima estupendo de sinergias en los que se cruzan ideas y siempre salen cosas de ahí. Y ese tipo de cosas son las que hay que fomentar. Sin eso no hay nada. Hay que hacerlo.
I help run a small music venue, and I'm a big, passionate believer in the importance of local community venues. But the way we survive is not just by putting on bands, charging people for tickets and food and beer. We survive because we work with the local council and we provide community support. We have groups for toddlers, for babies and children. We help young people discover music and become musicians. We help older musical creatives find their way in the music industry by putting on little conferences like this. We have an apprenticeship program to help people find jobs in the live music industry. And because we do all of this, we get grants from the council to provide all of this support.
Is that in Malaga?
No, this is in Birkenhead. So I am from Liverpool in England. And actually, I'm from a town called Birkenhead, which is across the water from Liverpool. And when I moved to Malaga, I still wanted to have a strong connection with the town where I grew up. And this was my way of doing it, by getting involved with a small venue there. And, you know, it's interesting because the three of us are down here and we've been working with Fernando and seeing what he has with his bar. You know, that bar is a place where people come together, it forms a community. And people go there, they talk to each other, they become inspired, and they go out and they create art and they put their own shows on, they put their own, you know, maybe they become inspired to get their own band together, their own festival going. And I think by doing this, you can grow, and by growing in your local community, especially if you're an artist, you should always think to become, you know, an artist that's getting, you know, awareness in your town, and then from your town you can maybe be an artist in your province, and then from being the artist in your province you can be the artist in that country, and then you know, if you keep thinking like that, you can actually grow if that's what you want to do. But it all comes back to starting locally and meeting like-minded people.
Comenta que lo importante es empezar de manera muy local, en grupos de amigos, como decía antes Youth. Por ejemplo, comentaba el automático, el bar de Fernando, donde estuvo ayer en la exposición que ha presentado. Ese tipo de entornos donde se puede juntar gente, generar ideas. Y también comentaba de un proyecto con el que sigue muy relacionado cerca de Liverpool, donde trabajan con niños, hacen tanto sesiones formativas, conferencias como esta que estamos haciendo aquí, grupos de música que puedan gustar a los niños, a gente más mayor. Y lo que comenta es que lo que hay que hacer es que ir de lo local y tratar de ir subiendo de nivel, de lo local a lo un poquito más grande, hasta llegar a lo nacional y quizás así poder expandirse globalmente. También comentaba Youth, antes que no lo he dicho, que otra cosa importante es reducir las tasas para permitir que todo eso pueda suceder, que se faciliten las cosas para que la gente pueda reunirse a hacer cosas y que no sea tan costoso.
Also, can I just say, like, I get where I live in London, there's a little Italian restaurant, and it's full of Italians. It takes 2 weeks to get a table booked, and people travel 50 miles, 100 miles to go and eat there. So, quality, be the best you can be, make the best art, make the best photographs, do the best music that you can do, and get the quality up, and people will travel for that.
Comenta un caso de una pizzería, un italiano, no sé si es una pizzería, un italiano que hay cerca de donde él vive, que dice que hay gente que viaja desde muy lejos para ir a comer allí. Hay reservas que llevan, how long it takes to take a table, you said?
2 weeks.
2 weeks. 2 semanas tardan en tener una reserva, pero que la gente, como es tan bueno el italiano, no tiene ningún problema y espera esas 2 semanas para comer allí. En definitiva, lo que quiere decir con eso es que cuando el arte es bueno, al final sale, que lo que hay que hacer es un arte de la mejor calidad, porque eso siempre va a llegar. ¿Tenéis alguna otra pregunta? ¿No? I would go back to the anecdotes. What could you tell us about your big experience in those years with all the groups you've been to? a few. Tell us a few things.
Mine are unrepeatable. I think.
Yeah, I stopped drinking in 2001 because of too many anecdotes in the 1990s. You know.
Here's one. Okay, so once I was working with Paul McCartney, I wanted him to put a lyric and a vocal on a track we made. And he's like, well, you know, don't know if I have much to say today. So, and it was shocking that someone as realized a genius as him might have a off day or not have anything to say. You know, so the next day I came in with a lot of poetry books, and I said, look, we're going to play a game. We're going to pick a word, pick a page, write it down, cut it up, put it in the hat, and then we'll make a song out of it. And in 20 minutes, he had a finished song. That was fantastic.
That's for McCartney.
No, that's Paul McCartney. But also, like, you know, sometimes when I do a lot of painting as well. I'll wake up and I'll go in my studio, look at last night's work, and I'll go, oh, that's awful. That's just the worst. And I just think I'll have to go and find a noose and hang myself. And I think maybe I'll have a coffee first. And I have a coffee and I come back and I see a little bit and I go, actually that bit's quite good. So I think the inner narrative we have when we're being creative can be really destructive. Part of the reward of being a painter or a musician is when you're doing it, you're not thinking, you don't have the inner narrative. So it's important to stay inspired enough to push through the voice that says it's no good, it's rubbish. Have another coffee, have a smoke, and then have another look. And then you're like, actually, it's pretty good. And I think it's really important to remember that as an artist, because everybody has the blank sheet, paralyzed, and there's ways around it.
Estaba comentando que Paul McCartney en una ocasión estaba con él y que le dijo, dime algo, él no tenía nada que decirle, no tengo nada que decir. Buscó unos libros con poemas o con hojas de poemas y le puso las hojas delante, empezaron a jugar con las letras y tal, y dice que en media hora tenía hecha una canción, Paul McCartney. Y luego también ha comentado que él también pinta y que, bueno, en una ocasión hizo un cuadro que le parecía a él mismo horroroso. Cuando lo vio dijo, esto es una mierda, me voy a colgar del techo, esto es una mierda. Y bueno, que luego dio un paso atrás, te fumas tu cigarro, lo miras de otra manera y bueno, hasta te puede parecer bueno. Lo que quiere decir con eso es que la mente creativa es muy destructiva también y que también hay que tomar distancia de todo y que la hoja en blanco la tenemos todos, con lo cual hay que ser también un poco benévolo con eso.
I was just going to mention going to see a band in 1998 in a small pub in North London, and it's a pub called the Bull and Gate in a place called Kentish Town in North London. And I'd been there many times and seen many great bands that I'd signed and gone on. And I'd heard about this new band that were playing there, and they were called Coldplay. And a lot of people were going to check them out. They were meant to be quite good. So I go down there and there's a crowd of people and we go in and watch them. And the singer, and he plays a bit behind the piano and he comes out and sings on his own at the front. And I've got to be honest, I found him really annoying. And maybe it was the way he looked. He had sort of like big hair and he was super confident and he had a very posh voice. He did have a really beautiful voice, and I liked his voice a lot. I just found him really annoying, and I didn't necessarily like the songs. There wasn't a single song that rang out that I thought was great. So I was a bit, well, you know, that's okay, that's interesting. But I didn't get excited about it. And then I walked away, and to be honest, most people in the room felt the same way, but there was one lady that was there, her name's Caroline Ellery, and she absolutely saw something. She loved the voice, she thought he was a really good songwriter, and most importantly, she had met Chris and knew what a remarkable human being he was, and how focused and how driven he was. And she was the one that they went and worked with, and she was absolutely the right person to go and work with. And I got a lot of trouble from my bosses for not going in and signing it and not having the vision to sign it, but you don't, you know, there's no point getting upset about that, because the important thing is to go out and find something else to go and work with, which luckily I was able to do. But it is very easy to talk about all of the wonderful success and things that you've done, but you know, there are so many great artists that I didn't get, that I didn't understand. And Coldplay were probably the biggest.
La anécdota que nos cuentas de Coldplay, fue un día a un concierto al norte de Londres, a una sala, y entró allí y vio a un grupo que, bueno, era Coldplay, y se acercó, la música no le estaba incluso molestando, no le gustaba nada. Cree que al primer momento fue por el aspecto que tenía el tipo que tocaba por allí, que tenía el pelo muy abultado y parecía muy creído de sí mismo, ¿no? Muy poseído de sí mismo. No le gustó nada. Sí pensó que tenía una bonita voz y no se interesó mucho más por el grupo. Lo dejó pasar. Hubo una chica, que no he entendido su nombre, ahora si no le preguntamos, que sí se fijó en él y se dio cuenta de que era un tío que tenía unas grandes aptitudes y que podía llegar muy lejos. Dice que él no lo vio, pero que esta mujer realmente fue la que entendió de qué iba Chris Martin y la banda Coldplay, y que fue quien realmente cogió a la banda y hizo lo que hizo con ellos. The name of the woman you were talking about?
Her name is Caroline Ellery.
Caroline Ellery.
So she worked for a company, well, it was BMG then, and she went on and she signed many other great artists. She originally is from Manchester in the north of England, and she used to run a studio there called Strawberry, where a lot of really great artists. Did you record at Strawberry?
No, but we've heard about it. Yeah.
But yeah, like the Stone Roses came out of that studio, and the Spiral Carpets and the Charlatans, they all worked there. And she was absolutely the right person for Coldplay. I would not have been the right person. I'd have tried to make them too cool.
Es un tío muy cool y dice que fue lo correcto, que esa persona era quien tenía que coger a Coldplay, que no siempre se busca a la persona, y que la persona correcta llegó, que era esa. Bueno, creo que tenemos que cerrar ya esta charla. ¿Tienes una pregunta? Rápido, que nos queda muy poquito.
I have a lot of questions for our VIP, guest, but one is like one for you. What about the bass? It's beautiful, and it looks like he's so genius and generous. What about the bass lines of Comes a Time of Nirvana? Can you explain that?
Bass lines of who? Oh, the Nirvana one. Oh, yeah.
It's great. Yeah.
No, it wasn't. It was actually Geordie wrote that bass line. Our guitarist in Killing Joke. But yeah, it's we stole it from Baby Come Back Down. Eddie Grant and the Eagles, 60s record. So, actually I was having dinner with Alan Moore, the artist, who wrote the Killing Joke Batman novel. And I was waiting for the question, and he was like, "Where did you get the name for that from?" Because I was like, I'm not going to ask him first. And I said, we got it off Monty Python. It was a Monty Python episode. And then I said, where'd you get yours from? And he didn't answer me. But yeah, so I'd left the band when 80s came out, which was a Killing Joke record with the same riff. And when I rejoined a few years later, the issue came up about Nirvana. Both Jazz and Geordie were like, yeah, let's sue them. We're going to make money. And I was like, you can't sue them. We can't sue them, you can't sue them. Why not? I said, because we stole that riff from Eddie Graham. And Eddie Graham, I'd heard, had some very heavy connections. You know, and I said, so if we sue them and then Eddie won't sue us, we'll just disappear. And I said, morally we can't do that because pretty much every riff we've ever had, we've stolen from somewhere else. And all great art is based on people being influenced to the point of theft by something that makes them want to be influenced by it. We were talking about this earlier, that Turner, the great British artist, was considered original to the Romantic school in the 16th century, which meant the word original meant then a specific origin. So Turner was, origins were the Romantic school, so he was original to the Romantic. In the subsequent 200 years, we've twisted it to mean something unique, but actually original means where did it come from? So you could say Keith Richards is a blues guitarist because most of his riffs he's copied from blues records, but he's made them distinctly his own as well. And that's what great artists do. You want to be a great writer, you have to read great books. Anybody who says to me they don't listen to other people's music, I know their music isn't going to be very good. You have to steal. You have to steal passionately and deeply so that it affects you, changes you, molecular structure. And then maybe a little tiny bit of that dust will rub off on your own ideas and you'll do something that's genius. But you won't, the paradox is, if you try and be original, you'll sound like a cliche. But if you actually go really deeply into the source and origin of what you're doing, you'll sound unique. I don't understand why, but that's what happens. So I encourage artists I work with to steal. If you feel it there, Joe Wobble said this to me, he said, if you feel it there, it's yours, have it. And it is. Yeah, well, that's a compliment. That's better than getting paid. To influence an artist like Kurt Cobain, Nirvana, you can't buy that. No, it wasn't mine. It was Geordie's. I wasn't in the band at the time. But you know, I've had other bass lines nicked off me, and songs, everything. I think it's good. Take it, have it. I grew up with sampling, you know. Sampling is all about making music out of other people's music. Now, actually, interesting, we were saying AI is in a similar realm legally. You can legally just take it. So I'd encourage you to do that as an artist.
I'm sorry to cut you, but the time is over. We have to present the music. Vais a tener, perdón, seguí hablando en inglés. Vais a tener ahora el concierto de Three Head con Alan McAgee y su banda. Exactamente, van a tocar ahora aquí para vosotros. Vamos a cambiar un poquito este escenario, recoger todo esto, pero quedaros porque viene la música, ¿vale? Y nos vamos a tomar un aperitivo ahí fuera con todos vosotros y seguimos charlando con ellos. Thanks a lot for being here. We were delighted to have you here. Thank you so much for all you've done in the music and here tonight. Thank you.
Well, I think we have. Well, we're starting.